She quoted the Bible while destroying her own children's confidence. She smiled in every church pew photo while her son grew up terrified of disappointing her. Mary Cooper is remembered as the sweet, sassy, God-fearing mother from East Texas. But strip away the accent, the charm, and the bless your heart one-liners, and what's left is a woman who used faith as a weapon and called it love. Today, we're not talking about the Mary Cooper the show wants you to remember. We're talking about the one hiding in plain sight, the one the evidence actually points to. And by the end of this video, you'll never watch her scenes the same way again. For anyone new here, Mary Cooper is the matriarch of the Cooper family in the Big Bang Theory and Young Sheldon universe. Devout Southern Baptist, sharp-tongued, endlessly quotable. On the surface, she's the glue holding a chaotic household together. Raising 3 kids in Medford, Texas, with a genius son nobody quite knew what to do with, a husband drowning in quiet disappointment, and 2 other children who never got the attention they deserved. Fans love her. She's funny. She's resilient. She survives things most fictional parents never have to face. But here's the uncomfortable truth nobody wants to say out loud. Surviving hardship doesn't automatically make you a good mother. And when you actually line up her choices, not her one-liners, not her charm, but her choices, a very different picture starts to form. Let's start with the elephant in the living room. Missy and Georgie, 2 children, 2 humans who existed in that house every single day, and how much of Mary's emotional energy actually went to them. Barely any. Sheldon absorbed almost all of it, not because he needed more love, but because he was the one who made her visible. A genius son gave Mary Cooper status, bragging rights at church, a narrative she could control. Georgie, meanwhile, was quietly left to raise himself. No one checked in when he dropped out of school. No one asked why a teenage boy was suddenly playing provider for the family. Missy fought for scraps of attention her entire childhood, constantly living in the shadow of a brother she never asked to compete with. Mary didn't create that dynamic by accident. She reinforced it, year after year, dinner after dinner, choosing which child's pain got attention and which child's pain got ignored. That's not favoritism by circumstance. That's a pattern. And patterns are choices repeated so many times they start to look like personality. But favoritism alone isn't the worst of it. What she did with faith is where things get really uncomfortable. Mary's relationship with God is presented as the heart of who she is. And to be fair, her faith is genuine. That's not in question. What's in question is how she used it. Religion, in Mary's hands, wasn't just comfort, it was control. Every disagreement got reframed as a moral failing. Every doubt her children expressed got treated less like a normal part of growing up and more like a personal betrayal of her. Sheldon, a child who processed the world through logic and evidence, was made to feel like an outsider in his own home simply for asking honest questions about belief. Think about that for a second. A 9-year-old boy, already isolated from his peers, already struggling to connect emotionally with the people around him, and the one place that should have been safe, home, became another place where he had to perform faith to avoid disappointing his mother. That's not spiritual guidance. That's conditional love disguised as scripture. And conditional love from a parent doesn't just shape a childhood, it shapes an entire adult personality. Some fans even argue that Sheldon's rigid, rule-obsessed adult behavior on Big Bang Theory didn't come from nowhere. It came from somewhere very specific. It came from Mary. And if you think that's the deepest wound she left behind, wait until you see how she treated the people her children chose to love. Mary Cooper judged. Constantly, quietly, sweetly, devastatingly. Look at how she treated Mandy, Georgie's partner and the mother of his child. Instead of leading with compassion for a young woman in an incredibly difficult situation, Mary's first instinct was judgment wrapped in Southern politeness. A tight smile, a pointed comment, a moral calculation happening behind her eyes before she'd even said hello. This wasn't an isolated moment. Mary consistently treated people who didn't fit her worldview. Non-believers, unconventional families, anyone who lived outside her moral rulebook, with a kind of performative sweetness that barely masked contempt underneath. She'll deny it with a laugh and a Bible verse. But actions speak louder than scripture recited for effect. And here's the uncomfortable part. This judgment didn't stay outside the family. It seeped in. Her children learned early that love in that house came with conditions. Be good, be faithful, be what she needed you to be. Fail to meet those conditions, and you'd feel the chill, even if she never raised her voice. That chill, it followed all three of her kids into adulthood, and it's about to get worse. Now here's where it gets really uncomfortable, because everything we've covered so far is just the surface. There's one moment, one specific choice Mary Cooper made that fans still argue about to this day. A moment where the mask fully drops, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. Stick around because we're about to get there. Let's talk about George Sr. Mary's marriage is often framed sympathetically. A woman standing by her flawed husband through his drinking, his mistakes, his slow unraveling. And there's truth in that framing. But look closer, and you'll notice something else. Mary rarely met George with warmth. She met him with disappointment dressed as duty. Every conversation between them carried an undertone of moral superiority. She wasn't just his wife, she positioned herself as his judge. And children absorb that dynamic, whether adults realize it or not. Sheldon, Missy, and Georgie didn't just watch a marriage struggle. They watched their mother slowly withdraw affection from their father while publicly performing the role of the patient, godly wife. That contradiction, public devotion, private coldness, became the blueprint for how all three kids would eventually approach relationships themselves. Georgie repeating patterns of instability, Missy struggling with self-worth, Sheldon avoiding emotional vulnerability almost entirely for most of his adult life. None of that happened in a vacuum. It happened in a house shaped by Mary Cooper's choices. Here it is, the moment fans still debate. Late in the timeline, when tragedy strikes the Cooper family, Mary's grief is real. Nobody's disputing that. But watch how she processes it. Watch who she leans on, who she blames, and who she quietly punishes with distance in the aftermath. Grief has a way of revealing character because it strips away performance. And in that unfiltered moment, Mary doesn't reach for unconditional comfort for her children. She reaches for control, for structure, for scripture as armor, rather than scripture as shelter. It's subtle. It's not a scream-in-your-face villain moment. It's quieter, and honestly, that's what makes it worse. Because subtle harm is the kind children carry the longest. It's the kind that doesn't show up as a single dramatic scene, but as a lifetime of adult children who struggle to say, "I love you," without flinching. That's the evidence. Not one big moment, a lifetime of small ones, stacked so high that by the end, you can't call it circumstance anymore. You have to call it character. So is Mary Cooper just terrible? Here's the honest answer. She's not a cartoon villain. She's something far more realistic and far more unsettling. She's a parent who genuinely believed she was doing right, while consistently choosing control over connection, image over honesty, and conditional love over unconditional support. That's not evil in the dramatic sense. That's a very human, very common kind of harm. The kind that hides behind good intentions and southern charm, and gets excused because it comes wrapped in humor and hardship. The evidence isn't one scene, it's the pattern. And once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. Maybe that's the real reason Mary Cooper is such a fascinating character. She's not written as a villain, and she'd never see herself as one. But great writing doesn't need a mustache-twirling antagonist to show damage. Sometimes the most realistic harm comes from the person setting the table every night, saying grace and smiling for the photo, while quietly shipping 3 children around her own need for control. That's not a monster. That's something far more familiar. And maybe that's exactly why so many people watching felt seen, for better and for worse. So, do you think Mary Cooper deserves the terrible mother label, or do you think circumstance excuses her choices? Drop your honest take in the comments. I read every single one. And if this kind of deep, evidence-based character breakdown is your thing, subscribe, because we're just getting started digging into the Cooper family.